This proves that my brother's affection for me is dead. What have I to do with this? I will become a layman and live in the exercise of charity and other good works of a lay character." And on the next day early he went forward, vowing become a layman again. Now at the first break of day, as Lord Buddha was remotely surveying the world in his meditative trance, as he did every morning, the master became aware of this, and going forward even earlier than Little Merchant, he paced to and fro by the porch on Little Merchant's road. As the latter came out of the house, he observed the master, and with a salutation went up to him. "Where you go at this hour, Little Merchant?" said the master. "My brother has expelled me from the order, monkhood, sir, and I am going to leave and move away." "Little Merchant, as it was under me that you took the vows, why did you not, when expelled by your brother, come to me? What have you to do with a layman's life? You come with me." So saying, he took Little Merchant and seated him at the door of his own perfumed chamber. Then giving him a perfectly clean cloth which he had supernaturally created, the master said, "Face towards the east, and as you handle this cloth, repeat these words: removal of impurity, removal of impurity." Then at the time appointed the master, attended by the brotherhood, went to Jivaka's house and sat down on the seat set for him. Now Little Merchant, with his gaze fixed on the sun, sat handling the cloth and repeating the words, "Removal of impurity, removal of impurity." And as he kept handling the piece of cloth, it became dirty. Then he thought, "Just now this piece of cloth was quite clean, but my personality has destroyed its original state and made it dirty." Impermanent indeed are all worldly things. And even as he realized death and decay, he won the Arhat's illumination enlightened equal to Buddha. Knowing that Little Merchant's mind had won illumination, the master sent forward an apparition and in this resemblance of himself appeared before him, as if seated in front of him and saying, "Little Merchant, this mere piece of cloth has become dirty and stained with impurity, within you are the impurities of lust and other evil things. Remove them." And the apparition uttered these stanzas: "Impurity exists in the lust, not in dirt, and lust we term as the real impurity. Yes, monks, whosoever drives it away from him, he truly lives the teaching of the purification. Impurity exists in the anger, not in dirt, and anger we term as the real impurity. Yes, monks, whosoever drives it away from him, he truly lives the teaching of the purification. Impurity exists in the delusion not having enlightenment, not in dirt, and the delusion we term as the real impurity. Yes, monks, whosoever drives it away from him, he truly lives the teaching of the purification." Note, here delusion means, one not practicing meditation as taught by Buddha, because in meditation, a person can experience truths about everyday life, i.e. about sense perceptions, feelings, emotions, desires, reactions, thoughts etc. too. Also delusion means not experiencing the true happiness of the inner self in trance states and remaining deluded in gaining worldly pleasures as the only means of happiness. 3. And ultimately delusion means not having experience of the transcendental nirvanic state of enlightenment, the final truth. At the close of these stanzas Little Merchant attained arhatship enlightenment equal to Buddha, with the 4 branches of knowledge, by which he straightway came to have knowledge of all the sacred texts. Tradition has it that, in ages past, when he was a king and was making a procession round his city, he wiped the sweat from his brow with a spotless cloth which he was wearing, and the cloth was stained. Thought he, "It is this body of mine which has destroyed the original purity and whiteness of the cloth, and dirtied it. Impermanent indeed are all worldly things." Thus he grasped the idea of impermanence, and hence it came to pass that it was the removal of impurity which worked his enlightenment/nirvana, salvation. Meantime, Jivaka Komarabhaka offered the water of donation, ceremonial, to mark start of meal, but the master put his hand over the vessel, saying, "Are there no brethren monks, Jivaka, in the monastery?" Said older merchant, "There are no brethren monks there, reverend sir." "Oh yes, there are, Jivaka," said the master. "Hey, there," said Jivaka to a servant, "just you go and see whether or not there are any brethren monks left out in the monastery." At that moment Little Merchant became conscious, through clairaudience, as he was, that his brother was stating that there were no brethren monks in the monastery, determined to show him that there were, and so he filled the whole mango grove with nothing but disciples, using supernatural powers of arhatship after achieving enlightenment. Some were making robes, others dying, while others again were repeating the sacred texts, each of 1,000 brethren monks he made unlike all the others. Finding these many of brethren monks in the monastery, the man returned and said that the whole mango grove was full of brethren monks. But as regards the little merchant now attained to elder monk, up in the monastery little merchants, 1,000 times self-multiplied, are there present, in that pleasant grove. Now go back, said the master to the man, and say the master sends for him whose name is little merchant. But when the man went and delivered his message, 1,000 mouths all answered, I am little merchant. I am little merchant. Back came the man with the report, they all say they are little merchant, reverend sir. Well now go back, said the master, and take by the hand the first one of them who says he is the little merchant, and the others will all vanish. The man did as he was asked, and straightway the 1,000 brethren monks vanished from sight. The little merchant, now an elder monk, came back with the man. When the meal was over, the master said, Jivaka, take little merchant's bowl, he will return thanks. Jivaka did so. Then like a young lion roaring defiance, the elder monk little merchant, covered the whole of the sacred texts through in his address of thanks. Lastly, the master rose from his seat and attended by the order returned to the monastery, and there, after the assignment of tasks by the brotherhood monks, he rose from his seat and, standing in the doorway of his perfumed chamber, delivered a Buddha discourse to the brotherhood. Ending with a theme which he gave out for meditation, and dismissing the brotherhood, he retired into his perfumed chamber, and lay down lion-like on his right side to rest. At evening, the orange-robed brethren monks assembled together from all sides in the Hall of Truth and sang the Master's praises, even as though they were spreading a curtain of orange cloth round him as they sat. Brethren monks, they said, older merchant failed to recognize the zeal of little merchant, and expelled him from the monastery as a dullard who could not even learn a single stanza in 4 whole months. But the all-knowing Buddha by his supremacy and the truth gave him arhatship enlightenment equal to Buddha, with all its supernatural knowledge, even while a single meal was in progress. And by that knowledge he grasped the whole of the sacred texts. Oh! How great is a Buddha's power! Now the Lord Buddha, knowing full well, by clairaudience, the talk that was going on in the Hall of Truth, thought it well to go there. So, rising from his Buddha couch, he, wearing his 2 orange undercloths, got up as if with lightning, clothed himself in his orange-colored robe, the ample robe of a Buddha, and came to the Hall of Truth with the infinite grace of a Buddha, moving with the royal gait of an elephant in the grace of his vigor. Ascending the glorious Buddha throne set in the midst of the magnificent hall, he seated himself upon the middle of the throne, emitting those 6-colored rays which mark a Buddha, like the newly arisen sun, just like from the peaks of the Yugandhara mountains it illumines the depths of the ocean. Immediately as the all-knowing one came into the hall, the brotherhood broke off their talk and were silent. Gazing round on the company with gentle loving kindness, the master thought within himself, this company is perfect. Not a man is guilty of moving hand or foot improperly, not a sound, not a cough or sneeze is to be heard. In their reverence and awe of the majesty and glory of the Buddha, not a man would dare to speak before I did, even if I sat here in silence all my life long. But it is my part to begin, and I will open the conversation. Then in his sweet divine tones he addressed the brethren monks and said, What, I request, is the theme of this meeting? And what was the talk which was broken off? Sir, said they, it was no useless theme, but your own praises that we were telling here in the meeting. And when they had told him word for word what they had been saying, the master said, Brethren monks, yes, through me little merchant has just now risen to great heights in the faith, in times past also it was to great things in the way of wealth that he rose, through me. The brethren monks asked the master to explain this, and the Lord Buddha made clear in these words a thing which previous existences had hidden from them. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares in Kasi, the Bodhisattva was born into the treasurer's family, and growing up, was made treasurer, being called Treasurer Little. A wise and clever man was he, with a keen eye for signs and omens. One day on his way to wait upon the king, he came on a dead mouse lying on the road, and, taking note of the position of the stars at that moment, he said, "Any decent young fellow with his wits about him has only to pick that mouse up, and he might start a business and keep a wife." His words were overheard by a young man of good family but reduced circumstances, who said to himself, "That's a man who has always got a reason for what he says." And accordingly he picked up the mouse, which he sold for a small coin at a tavern for their cat. With the small coin he got molasses and took drinking water in a water pot. Coming on flower gatherers returning from the forest, he gave each a tiny quantity of the molasses and served the water out to them. Each of them gave him a handful of flowers, with the proceeds of which, next day, he came back again to the flower grounds provided with more molasses and a pot of water. That day the flower gatherers, before they went, gave him flowering plants with half the flowers left on them, and thus in a little while he obtained 8 pennies. Later, one rainy and windy day, the wind blew down a quantity of rotten branches and leaves in the king's garden, and the gardener did not see how to clear them away. Then up came the young man with an offer to remove the lot, if the wood and leaves might be his. The gardener closed with the offer on the spot. Then this good pupil of Treasurer Little went to the children's playground and in a very little while had got them by bribes of molasses to collect every stick and leaf in the place into a heap at the entrance to the garden. Just then the king's potter was on the lookout for fuel to fire bowls for the palace, and coming on this heap, took the lot off his hands. The sale of his wood brought in 16 pennies to this pupil of Treasurer Little, as well as 5 bowls and other vessels. Having now 24 pennies in all, a plan occurred to him. He went to the vicinity of the city gate with a jar full of water and supplied 500 mowers with water to drink. Said they, "You've done us a good turn, friend. What can we do for you?" "Oh, I'll tell you when I want your aid," said he, and as he went about, he struck up an intimacy with a land trader and a sea trader. Said the former to him, "Tomorrow there will come to town a horse dealer with 500 horses to sell." On hearing this piece of news, he said to the mowers, "I want each of you today to give me a bundle of grass and not to sell your own grass till mine is sold." "Certainly," said they, and delivered the 500 bundles of grass at his house. Unable to get grass for his horses elsewhere, the dealer purchased our friend's grass for 1,000 pieces. Only a few days later his sea trading friend brought him news of the arrival of a large ship in port, and another plan struck him. He hired for 8 pence a well-appointed carriage which commuted for hire by the hour, and went in great style down to the port. Having bought the ship on credit and deposited his signet ring as security, he had a pavilion pitched hard by and said to his people as he took his seat inside, "When merchants are being shown in, let them be passed on by 3 successive guides into my presence." Hearing that a ship had arrived in port, about 100 merchants came down to buy the cargo, only to be told that they could not have it, as a great merchant had already made a payment on account. So away they all went to the young man, and the footman duly announced them by 3 successive guides, as had been arranged beforehand. Each man of the 100 forcefully gave him 1,000 pieces to buy a share in the ship, and then a further 1,000 each to buy him out altogether. So it was with 200,000 pieces that this pupil of Treasurer Little returned to Benares. Actuated by a desire to show his gratitude, he went with 100,000 pieces to call on Treasurer Little. "How did you come by all this wealth?" asked the treasurer. "In 4 short months, simply by following your advice," replied the young man, and he told him the whole story, starting with the dead mouse. Thought Lord High Treasurer Little, on hearing all this, "I must see that a young fellow of these parts does not fall into anybody else's hands." So he married him to his own grown-up daughter and settled all the family estates on the young man. And at the treasurer's death, he became treasurer in that city. And the Bodhisattva passed away to fare according to his deeds. His lesson ended, the Supreme Buddha, the all-knowing one himself, repeated this stanza, "With humblest start and small capital a clever and able man will rise to wealth, even as his breath can nurse a tiny flame." Also the Lord Buddha said, "It is through me, brethren monks, that little merchant has just now risen to great heights in the faith, as in times past to great things in the way of wealth. His lesson thus finished, the master made the relation between the two stories he had told and identified the birth in these concluding words: Little merchant was in those days the pupil of Treasurer Little, and I myself Lord High Treasurer Little.